Welcome back to another episode of Growth Marketers Podcast. I'm Samuel Timothy.
And I'm Taylor Rowe. Today, we did our annual marketing predictions for next year. So over the last 2 or 3 years, we've been doing this podcast. As we approach, the end of the year, it's always fun to take a look back on a year in review in terms of marketing. What happened, right? Digital marketing is such a fast-paced world, especially the agency world. It's not often that we get to reflect back on what happened over the last year and kind of look at some fun predictions for next year. So we each came up with a few predictions for next year in terms of marketing 2022. And we took a look back at some of our predictions from 2021 to see what came true. So please give us a like, give us a subscribe on the podcast here, and enjoy the episode.
So Taylor, I know for the past few years we've been doing toward the end of the year, we kind of do more of a marketing prediction of what to expect in the upcoming year. And so for this episode, we certainly want to do something very similar, kind of review what we've done in terms of prediction when we were back in 2019, what to expect, back in 2020, what to expect in 2021, and kind of review a little bit of that. And then actually also do some prediction of what to expect in 2022 as we're all planning a new year, new initiatives in terms of marketing and sales efforts. So that's what we want to do today.
Absolutely. Yeah. This is one of my favorite podcasts that we've done, although we've only done it, I guess, for 3 years now. So 3 times, but it starts to get you, gives you the ability to think outside the box and kind of step back and look at, how far we've come. Sometimes we get so far into the weeds of the day-to-day grind. You look back and say, 18, 24, months ago, 36 months, 3 years or 4 years, whatever it may be, like, hey, we wouldn't have done this way or that way, and to try to think and try to guess and be ahead of the curve on some of these marketing initiatives is pretty cool. So what I want to do is, take a look back at some of our predictions from last year. We made essentially 10 predictions. I think some of them are maybe a little bit difficult to quantify whether or not they came true or not, but I did look at a few of them and looked up some stats to kind of, see whether or not we were right or wrong here. So one of the predictions that we made last year, which was a little bit easy prediction based on the state of the world at the time, but said that there was going to be less spend in marketing on events, on in-person events. There certainly was a decrease in spend on in-person events, but to my surprise a little bit, if I think back to my mindset at the time when we made this prediction, I didn't think there was going to be as big of a focus on virtual events. In my mind, I thought, Zoom essentially, or, was really the only way to go about it. And I figured, Zoom fatigue, people would get basically frustrated and not want to do these virtual meetings because we're in virtual meetings all day. But I think a lot of innovation has come out of, the pandemic. We work with even some clients ourselves that have made some really, really cool online, event platforms. And so we've seen a huge actually increase in spending for virtual events. So I found a couple of reports on this data. There's a report from Statista that actually outlined there was about, depending on which type of event you looked at, is a 20 to 25% decrease in in-person events, but almost a 40% increase in spending for virtual events and virtual trade shows. So that's the piece that, obviously, we're all remote. You're going to see an increase in spend in virtual events. But the ways companies have adopted and the innovation that has come out of it has been, really surprising and promising to me. So certainly, I think we would say that prediction was accurate, that the total spend went down, but I think not as much as I thought that it would. It's not obviously as expensive to have a virtual event, but the volume of events, the number of companies that historically would have in-person events, were able to shift and go into, in-person events. The other prediction from 2021 prediction that I wanted to review was the increased spend on digital. So again, kind of an easy one to predict. We've seen this trend happen year over year that more companies, and obviously this being a B2B podcast, it's sometimes easy to follow the trend of what you see on B2C, and big, brands, companies are dumping money into digital. So if you look at that and you say, hey, do I want to, if it was a stock you would buy, right? Would you buy traditional marketing or digital marketing? It'd be pretty easy to say, hey, we're going to go all in on digital marketing. And that's what we've seen companies do and brands do. And we've seen that shift in B2B space as well. So I looked up a couple of stats just to kind of see where we're at and how big that increase was. So actually in 2020, global estimates, at least, of global digital ad spend was about $378 billion. That was in 2020. In 2021, there was a huge jump to $455 billion in global ad spend. So that's a pretty big increase in just a 1 year time, especially if you look at, percentages. Obviously, we're going from almost 380 billion to 460 billion is a big jump. If you look at how that ad spend is allocated, Google and Facebook, to no real surprise there, is about almost 30% of that global ad spend. So Google and Facebook counts for actually 28% of brands' ad spend, which is huge. That's by far the two leading categories. Amazon was actually the third with only about 2 or 3%. So making up, nearly 30% of that between those two platforms is massive. The biggest surprise to me, or I guess not necessarily a surprise, but indicator of where that ad spend is flowing and where that cash is flowing. When I mentioned that increase from 2020 to 2021, 65% of that growth went directly to Google and Facebook. So you look at, hey, if we're spending $100, we want to increase that to $200, almost 70% of that, 70 of those $100 increase went to those two platforms. So not a lot of experimenting with other platforms. A lot of companies are just strictly doubling down their investments into Google and Facebook as the primary ad platforms from 2020 to 2021.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing is even with all that increase, Facebook apparently in their Q3 earning reports, they were kind of fell behind on their expectations. So that's just crazy how much more they were expecting the spend would be with their platform.
Yeah. And every year, you got to move the needle and get a little bit higher on that ladder. It seems like all of these companies got to keep pushing the limits. And so don't expect your ad budgets or your cost per clicks or cost per CPM to decrease, right? If, like you said, if all of these companies are trying to hit their earnings marks and these massive predictions that they have in terms of where they think their revenue is going to be a year from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, we're going to be the ones paying for it, right?
It's true.
All right. So I think, again, in terms of our 2021 predictions a year ago, if you want to go listen to that podcast, I think there were some good predictions. I think a lot of them did come true. And I think some of those trends, maybe if they haven't come true yet, they're trending in that direction. But I thought those 2 points were a little bit interesting in those stats that we found. So let's jump into our 2022 predictions. Sam, I'll let you start. We each came up with 5 predictions. Again, maybe these are aggressive points of view, maybe not, maybe they're inevitable, but let's dive into what you think the trends in marketing are going to be next year, over the next year.
Yeah, most certainly. So I think the first one to begin is probably no surprise to most people as well. I think we've been seeing this to be the trend where companies are willing to invest more and more into technology. So if we looked at in the last maybe 10 years, CRM was not a thing and became a thing, and marketing automation was not a thing and became a thing. And now sales enablement was a thing in the last 2-3 years. So you're seeing, technology being adapted, right? I mean, you're seeing massive acquisitions by companies like Salesforce buying Slack for what is $17 billion. All these sort of technology that's actually enabling communication, marketing, sales enablement, all of those things. So I think the entire spend and adoption of these technologies is going to go much higher in 2022. And I think the part of it is being influenced by the hybrid business, working model, right? People working remotely, they're having to invest in technology that enable them to do things much more efficiently, being able to communicate efficiently internally, and also just to do more things efficiently. So I think the MarTech investment is going to be extremely high. And part of the reason I think it is, if you look at I was reading a little bit about the technology adoption bell curve. So you have a lot of the innovators that actually adopt the technology very early on. Then you have the early adopters that comes right after that. But then the majority usually kind of falls in that big, right in the bell curve in the middle. That audience is probably going to be the ones that are starting to invest into technology more. So there's a lot more people that are going to be out there that's well suited for adapting some of these technology. And if you just look at the US statistics of total number of businesses, I think the BIS Journal reported that there's over 32.5 million businesses in the US. And you look at some of the top MarTech product companies, right? You look at the Salesforce of the world or HubSpot. I think HubSpot reported that they have 100,000 customers. That's only what percentage of the 32 million is 100,000? It's very small, right? So if you think about how much more is the addressable market for companies like HubSpot and Pardot and Salesforce and all those different companies. That's why you're seeing a lot more sales tools are coming into the marketplace, because they are realizing that how big is that addressable market. So I think overall, the technology investment in companies are going to go up, and you're going to see a lot more MarTech companies coming up as well.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that's interesting about that trend, I think this happens in every space, right? It's like you see a lot of specialized tools come out. The market gets flooded. There's so many tools. Then there's a lot of acquisition and cannibalization that happens. And then there's a huge need for integrations and integration partners because we have all these tools and none of them talk to each other. And then some sort of consolidation happens. And I feel like we're kind of at that place with marketing, whereas you look at, you mentioned HubSpot as an example. They've made that shift, right? Of like, I think if you probably went to their website, it doesn't say, their marketing software, marketing automation software. It's, they're building around a CRM. We as marketers really figure out what's going on. There's been a push for years on marketing and sales alignment. I think companies are restructuring their departments, all these kind of things. So I would venture to say that the MarTech space might shrink in terms of number of unique technologies, because I think that tech stack grows. And like I said, it's hard for those integrations and everything to kind of work together, and it becomes way too much and way too expensive. And I think that consolidation, the spend may increase, right? More companies are going to see a need for marketing technology, but I think it's going to be cross-departmental. And I think it's going to be a platform, more all-in-one solutions that kind of talk to each other. And that you see that a lot. What you see with, what you mentioned, Pardot and Marketo and, Eloqua. And you see all these companies are acquiring these marketing technologies to try to figure out how do we fit these into CRM, ERP system. We want to have a single source of truth and want to have these tools that all talk and work together across departments. So I think there's going to be a lot of spend on marketing technology integrations and innovations is where that trend will go. So I agree with that.
Yeah. And I think my next one, if I can go to my second prediction, I
Sure.
think the AI and predictive analytics is going to take center stage, because I think what we're also seeing with all this technology adoption, you just have so much data available. But what I think we're lacking today is just how to, having real insights taken out of the data, right? And most of the time you're just creating dashboards and reports and trying to make sense of it. You're starting to see more and more technology that's actually providing insights to marketers and sales leaders and business in general on what actions they can take, right? So using predictive analytics or even just AI-driven campaign recommendation, things like that. So you're seeing more and more push from even Google Ads itself. Like they have automatic bidding, they have automatic campaigns. You basically have, responsive ads where you just create a bunch of different ad text and it automatically picks the best winning ad text. You're seeing that with a lot of other companies that are actually coming into the place that are managing just creatives alone. So looking at the best performing creatives and then, whatever the winning ad gets to be placed and investing more of the ad budget based on the performance of a specific creative. All of that is starting to coming into market. And then you're also going to see the same thing happening in even marketing campaigns when you're trying to do, like, let's say an email campaign, starting to recommend titles or subject lines and things like that. And I think that's going to have a center stage even in the sales as well, right? So it's going to tell you the best time of the day to send an email, outreach, the best time to call a prospect, and the likelihood of closing a deal based on how long they've been in the sales funnel, maybe even giving you recommendations on how many activities you need to be performing at every day so you can actually reach your revenue targets. All sorts of predictions and AI-driven recommendations, I think, is going to come, because I know even we as a company are using call recordings and things like that provide insights on how long a rep is talking, what kind of filler words are we using, what kind of pain points were brought up in sales conversations. Those are just insights there, but actually not providing enough recommendations on what I can do to fix my rep or how I can improve our sales approach or process. So I think companies are really looking for ways to be better, right? And technology is going to do a lot in terms of helping them accomplish those things.
Yeah, and just like with the evolution of any technology, it's as it advances, it then becomes cheaper and more available for smaller brands, right? So I agree, and you see that in more practical, kind of tactical insights, like you said, A/B testing subject lines and the best time to send an email and like real-time feedback and data versus, right now or, maybe a couple of years ago where you had to be a big brand and have access to a Power BI or a Tableau or something along those lines and spend hours, building these reports and then, have a business analyst, do research and predictive analytics and develop some sort of a strategy. It's like, okay, we have all this data, but we don't really know what it means, right? I think it's going to be more tactical and more available. And we're seeing that, like you said, in sales tools, marketing tools already. So I certainly agree with that. That trend will continue and kind of trickle down to more small businesses as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's an exciting thing for me as well, right? Especially a smaller organization, we don't have big departments. Or like you said, you don't have the luxury of having a business analyst just sitting there and looking at numbers and making sense out of it and then making recommendations. So I think smaller organizations are going to be the ones that are probably going to have a big impact by just having those sort of technology.
And the technology companies themselves have to figure it out, right? The marketing tools like a HubSpot or a Pardot, they have to figure it out. The CRM tools have to figure it out and build it in. We see it with ad platforms, obviously, right? The more advanced algorithms that deliver, have better deliverability to that audience and have better results in terms of cost per lead or whatever that may be. Those are where the ad spend goes. We just talked about, Google and Facebook getting the majority of that ad spend. It's because their ads are performing the best because of those, predictive analytics of who to serve the ad to, when to serve it to them, and those kind of things. So that's the advantage of, again, the advancements of technologies by those big companies. It's going to ultimately trickle down and impact us, small businesses.
Yeah, most certainly. I think my third prediction is mostly around revenue operation. I know we've been hearing this term a lot talked in the technology sector. More and more SaaS and technology-enabled companies are talking a lot about it. But I think overall, growth-oriented companies are going to start investing into revenue operation as a function within a company. Something that kind of unites the sales team, the marketing team, and even the operations team all together, providing support, right, to make the revenue operation as a key function. What I mean by that is, I think there's a lot of efforts on buying technology for CRM, right, for the sales team, and then marketing automation, and you also have the customer service, and maybe even on the operations on the ERP. There's a lot of stuff happening. But you need a unified, centralized place to manage all of those things and figuring out how do we get the most out of all of our efforts. So focus would be customer acquisition and figuring out, can we sell more to our existing customers and figuring those things out, or can we lower our cost of acquisition? Can we make our salespeople more efficient? Can we lower our total marketing investment? All of those things are ways that the revenue operation function can really help an organization. So I think from that perspective, revenue operation will take a center stage in organizations, and growth-oriented companies will start investing into an entire department.
Absolutely. We've seen that in the companies that are doing really well, and the companies that are winning have already adapted that. We talked about this for years, right? Everyone talks about that marketing and sales alignment. I think the structuring of the organization, starting with that idea of, marketing and sales falling under RevOps, working towards one goal, which is revenue, is a step in the right direction. I think is great for both sales and marketing departments.
Yeah. And then my fourth prediction is more around interactive content. I think we all seen an increase in the amount of content being produced. And with the advent of marketing automation and things like that, you have the ability to create so much content, and you have the ability to distribute that content at different time period based on who's at what stage of the buying process and all of those things. But even with all of that, I think there's so much human intervention involved in trying to guess that, maybe after the third form fill, I should probably invite them to a webinar or send them an ebook, or, if they're doing these activities, then maybe send them an email to get them to go book a demo. All of those things are, again, us just assuming things, but not really aligning our marketing and content creation to match the demand of a customer. So from that perspective, I think interactive content platforms are going to take center stage in my perspective, because if somebody's on the website, give them the opportunity to go find what they need and give them interactive content. But what I mean by that is maybe interactive calculators or interactive product builders, or even basically product configurators, maybe virtual design centers, all sorts of things like that you can make available that are interactive to keep the prospect engaged and also to help them find what they're looking for, and not wait on marketing to automatically send them something, or marketing to lead them to a blog post or something like that. And I think we're also seeing this trend of people running away from forms, right? Like the form, gating everything, that concept is not becoming very popular anymore, right? People don't like being, gated content or having to fill out a form to get anything, right? They just don't like that concept. So by having interactive content, you can actually lead them and you can continue to engage with them. And then hopefully, they will naturally go to the next step of that buyer journey and fill out a form or whatever the case might be. So I think that concept is going to see a big increase. You have so many platforms coming into the place, like Uberflip being one of them.
Yeah, I mean, that idea is not new, but I definitely see that trend continuing in terms of, we talk about it, right? Funnel versus flywheel and becoming more customer centric. And you hit the nail on the head in terms of there's so much data out there that your customers now they don't want to be in your funnel, right? So if you're not going to be the ones to provide that information, they're going to go somewhere else. So your competitor is going to provide that information. So earlier that you can recognize that and understand that for whatever industry you're in, and be the one to create that content in all the different formats, like you said, interactive, kind of providing a unique experience and allowing the user on your site or wherever they're at. I mean, part of it is even, being truly customer centric is don't try to force people to your website if they're not on your website, right? If you have content that you're sharing on social media, like the goal shouldn't just be drive people to your website. If you have content that's on, YouTube, it's a video that's literally created so that someone searching on YouTube can find an answer to or find a solution to whatever they're looking for, and you can display and articulate that message in a video. Why do you need to send them to your website, right? So like truly being customer centric is giving that unique experience and allowing the user to take their own path in a way that educates them and moves them along, in that sales process essentially, but into the point where when they're ready to buy, they come to you, right? So I agree with that. And I think it's not just, on the website. I think it's across all your marketing.
Most certainly. And I think my last one is, I think we've been seeing this number thrown around a lot. I think it was back in the day. I think SiriusDecision was acquired by Gartner. But essentially there was a number that 67% of the buyer's journey is completed before a buyer ever reaches out to a salesperson. But that might be even much larger today. And I think in the coming years, and specifically in 2022, marketing is going to own more of that customer journey and going to reach the customer even way before they're even thinking, right? Especially when we're talking about the AI-driven marketing campaigns and technology is able to create custom audience and being able to serve up ads in the right time to the right audience and the right platform. All of those things means marketing is going to own more and more of that customer journey. And I think that is here to stay. And I think the big trend that the senior leaders need to understand is start to measure marketing according to that sort of a customer journey. So if you're reaching customer way early in the buying journey, that means they probably are not ready to make purchase decisions. So you need to start measuring things slightly different than always with performance in mind of, hey, how much is our cost per lead? How come our cost per lead has gone up, or why our volume of lead hasn't increased? All of those sort of questions shouldn't take the center stage, right? You should be asking like, hey, how's our brand engagement? Is our sales volume improved? Is our close ratio has improved? Are we seeing the sales velocity increased, right? All of those kind of metrics should be taken into account and not just like, our cost per lead has gone up. Like you just said earlier from our last year's prediction where the spend has gone up, right? These platforms are getting inundated with ad spend, which means that demand is increasing. That means that it's inevitable that the cost of advertising on these platforms are only going to go up. So you couldn't compare last year's cost per lead and saying, hey, why is our cost per lead is not the same as last year, right? And why is our lead volume has dropped? Of course, there's more advertisers kind of spending the same amount of money, but marketing is still going to own more of that customer journey. And we just as leaders need to understand that and make sure that we're not measuring all of the marketing metrics in the same way we've done in the past.
Yep, 100% agree. Yeah, with all of those predictions. And like I said, I think a lot of those are kind of already trending in this direction. And I think there's no reason that it's going to slow down. I think it's just going to compound in 2022. So
sounds good.
Great predictions. I can't wait till next year to see if we were correct on those.
Yes.
So I also have a couple of predictions here. And the first one maybe is a bit of a stretch, but again, I like to think kind of outside the box on an exercise like this. But first prediction for 2022 is that a new ad platform of social media will arise. What I mean by that is, we just looked at those stats of 70% of the growth in ad spend went directly to Google and to Facebook. With any platform that you see, whenever there's a surplus of content, a surplus of advertisers, the supply, so to speak, isn't necessarily increasing. The number of users on Google, the number of users on Facebook. I don't have those stats offhand, but if you just think realistically, like people use Google, right? I mean, they've always used Google. I mean, more people are getting access to internet, sure. But if we look at, what we're talking about, our audience, US-based B2B, organizations, the user base of those two platforms is not necessarily growing. However, the ad spend, the advertisers is drastically increasing. And I just think it's time for something else to come up. I mean, we talk about this all the time in terms of trends with, let's say organic search, right? It used to be a lot easier to rank for any topic, that's out there because there wasn't as many results. And now pretty much anything you search online, I mean, there's millions and millions of results that show up. We talked about last year in some of our 2 years ago, our predictions was about the growth of podcasts. And we saw from 2018, there was only 500,000 podcasts. 2020, there was 34 million episodes and 1.5 billion podcasts. So, I mean, it's like these platforms are growing like crazy. And I think we're really in a position where there could be another platform that could come up. And it could be an existing platform. I mean, I don't know. It could be something, a TikTok, a LinkedIn, even. I think LinkedIn is still underutilized in the B2B space. And if there's a couple of shifts in maybe how the platform is used, if there's a big increase in, like I said, supply, meaning more and more B2B professionals start using LinkedIn more often, and they can fix and change the way that their advertising parameters and capabilities are set up. It's somewhere near the ability that Facebook has. I think they're ripe for some crazy growth from that perspective. So my first prediction, maybe is a little bit of a stretch. Maybe it doesn't happen for 2-3 years, but the way that the world works now, these platforms are popping up out of nowhere. So that's my first prediction.
Yeah, I think the diminishing return on ad spend on some of these platforms also is probably forcing other platforms to have an opportunity to shine. And I think what you said about LinkedIn too, I think LinkedIn is experimenting with this whole concept of creator profiles where you don't have to invite somebody to get connected. You can follow a person and you have all sorts of, right? Like you have the video, multiple videos, you have the live video options. They're experimenting with a bunch of different things that I'm seeing as well. So I think, like you said, it could be LinkedIn just kind of trying to fill the void, or somebody else could come in and just, eat up some of the market share that some of these other platforms I've been enjoying for a while.
Right. Absolutely. So my second prediction is similar to what you're saying about, RevOps and departmental changes that are going to happen. I think there's going to be a huge shift in the CMO position in particular. We work with a lot of CMOs, right? We work with a lot of director of marketing, VP of marketing, CMOs. And in the B2B world in particular, I see a couple of things. One is I see a lot of basically singular, departments, right? Where you're a CMO, is a department of one, right? Or a department of 5. And so it's a CMO in kind of title only and doesn't truly have the resources that a CMO truly should have. There's one thing that I see, and I think there's going to be a big shift in that in terms of marketing. A lot of companies hiring more marketing professionals, building out a true marketing department. But the other thing that we see all the time in the shift that I think is going to happen is CMO position having more of a hands-on approach, having more, it seems weird to say, but having more hands-on experience. Because if you look at, probably the average age of a CMO, the average, experience level required to hire a CMO, you see people that have been at a company or within a company in order to get promoted to that position for 10, 15, 20 years, or maybe they've been the CMO for 10 years. And again, the way that the industry and the landscape is changing and evolving, 10 years is a lifetime, right? In terms of marketing strategies and digital marketing. So what I've seen is a lot of these CMOs are so far removed from what's happening on the ground floor. And it's so different than any other industry. I think it's just really exponentially, that difference and that gap is huge from a CMO today versus, the person who's actually running their Google Ads account or running their social media ads account. And so there's a lot of kind of what I call surface level knowledge in that position of, we're going to invest into paid media, or we're going to invest into social, or maybe they just lump everything together and like, hey, our marketing strategy this year is, to spend 30% on digital, but not really knowing the details and, the ins and outs of how all of that works. I think that can't stand much longer. I think CMO, the level of knowledge is going to be needed to be a CMO, specifically in terms of these digital strategies and campaigns, is going to change. So I see a lot of companies kind of overhauling their marketing departments, starting with what it takes to be the CMO and how they want to structure their team.
Yeah, and I think, the smarter CMOs need to recognize that change in the industry and start to assemble the team that's needed to support that person, right? Yep. To do their calling and their function within that organization, and to make sure that they're protecting themselves, right? And also, it's also getting out of the comfort zone a little bit as well, because a lot of those CMOs that we know is like they've been doing the same thing over and over. They know it's safe to do whatever, right? Trade shows, they know it's been safe, and they know, hey, they have regular email marketing or paying the same directory every year, or they have the same SEO company or paid search company they've been working for 5 years. They have to start thinking a little bit differently, and also willing to experiment, and even starting to invest in technology and automation and things of that nature. It's going to be required if they want to keep the job, or if they want to continue to advance their career.
Yeah. And it starts with brands and companies starting to understand and see the value of marketing. Once they see the value of that marketing, they'll understand the importance of having the right people in those marketing positions. And unfortunately, in the digital marketing world, I mean, there's no accreditation, right? There's no like generally accepted accreditation program of, you're a senior level 3, marketer, right? Mm-hmm. So I think there's a lot of people that kind of fly under the radar, or people that, get by and get into these positions that don't necessarily have the expertise, and like you said, get a little bit complacent. And I think as companies, as CEOs, as brands, as business leaders start to see what their competition is doing, seeing what's out there, they start experiencing some of that marketing that is working on them, and inspiring them to work with other companies, other brands. They're going to double down on marketing. Is going to start with who they have as their VP of marketing, who they have as their CMO. So my third prediction for 2022 is a little bit of a continuation on one of my predictions for 2021. I mentioned in 2021 that I think brands are going to double down on video content. I think we've seen a huge trend in video. I think today is easier to create than ever, right? We don't need a full video production company, not to devalue, companies that are out there producing high quality video, but it's just a lot more accessible for a lot of brands that couldn't afford video in the past. And so my prediction is that video, and specifically short form video, is going to remain a top priority for B2B organizations. I think, again, if you look at our jobs as marketers, is to, educate and inspire our potential audience, right? And there's really no better way right now that we have to educate someone on a topic than a very well produced and thought out video. And again, it doesn't take a lot to create a very well produced and thought out video. So I think the way that we are as consumers, we talk about all these like attention spans are down. I don't know if necessarily that's true. I think if it's the right content, people will watch. I mean, you see people as consumers, we sit there and watch 8 seasons of a series on Netflix or something like that. So, or listen to a 3-hour podcast or whatever it is. So I don't necessarily know that attention spans are down, but I think if given the option of reading a 2,000 word blog article that, we don't know if we're ever going to get to what we're looking for, but listening to or watching a short form video that articulates that message, or a series of quick videos where you can go to the right chapter or whatever it may be. I think there's just better ways to articulate your message today. And I think video is one of those. And so I'm going to see a huge shift in brands investing into their own video content.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, because I think, like you said, the cost of video production has gone down, and then also the accessibility to all sort of technology that enables you to quickly edit videos and publish them much faster, right? So that, I think, is giving them the opportunity to be able to create such more video. And then also the demand for video also has gone up, right? So people are preferring that medium over reading. And for me, I make Siri read me long articles, and I listen to it as opposed to sitting there and reading it, just because I just rather hear it. So yeah. I think in that sense, you're going to definitely see that continue to increase, that trend.
Yeah, I mean, video and audio content, I would almost put them in the same bucket, but I think even video, just because of that visual component. And I think that combined with this, the way that we work today, right? In terms of we're at home, I think people are more able to watch videos. I mean, you think about a commute, for example, audio, podcasts, those type of things would be something you maybe listen to in your car on your headphones while you're on, public transportation, whatever it is. But I think we have a little bit more time today. I think people have maybe a little bit more flexibility and freedom of the ability to feel like they could sit and watch a video, rather than, if their boss comes around the corner and see them watching a video, even though it is, work related. I think there's just more advantages today, or more time, I guess, maybe, to actually sit there and watch the video. So I think video is going to continue to be huge. Again, similar to that, along those same lines, my fourth prediction is that brands are going to, we talked about that increase in digital spend. It's not that I don't think that digital spend is not going to increase, but I think there's going to be a big push for organic over paid. Again, if you look at where the competition is, you look at the trends, you look at what's happening. Google was supposed to get rid of cookies and third-party data and all these sorts of things this year. Now they've pushed it back to next year. Facebook's targeting capabilities have gone down. Pixel changes, 7-day attribution window, all these kind of things. We're going to continue to see this push towards privacy, which is going to ultimately change the way that we as advertisers and marketers are able to target people. So you can no longer buy that audience, right? And maybe, these companies are going to figure out a way to do it, right? We just talked about how many billions and billions of dollars Google and Facebook are making. So I don't expect them by any means to roll over and, wave the white flag and say, hey, we can't target people anymore. So it's just a blanket, ad campaign. I don't believe that's going to happen. But I think as marketers, we have to look at what variables we can control. And what you can control is owning your own audience. So I think there's going to be a bigger shift into building your following on social media, building your email list, building your subscribers on YouTube and your podcasts. And the more you can control your own audience, which is ultimately should be the goal for all marketers in general, right? If you talk about building brand awareness, it's not about the ability to target someone on a social platform. It's about building brand affinity and building a following in your industry. And so I think we're going to see that trend happening by kind of a default of those two reasons of, yes, we want to build brand awareness, tracking attribution is becoming more difficult, targeting is becoming more difficult. We have to do something with this energy where we're building up, like I just said, we're investing into video and audio and updating our websites. And you talked about, predictive analytics and building all these different, marketing tools and teams and resources internally. We have to do something with that and investing into our own digital infrastructure, so to speak, in terms of your own shared and earned content, right? Everything outside of paid. I think there's going to be a bigger shift in that than we've seen over the last couple of years.
Yeah, and I think I've also seen, I don't know, Facebook is now Meta, right? But I've seen a big demand for these Facebook groups. People are creating their own Facebook groups, inviting people,
Sure.
Their customers and prospective customers to those groups, and then obviously leveraging that closed network to market to those individuals. I know LinkedIn hasn't really gotten that much of a demand for the community and group on LinkedIn. But like you said, I think creating your own communities, whether it be on a social platform or finding technology that enables you to build that community and then controlling your ability to reach that audience is definitely a trend that I think we can expect to see.
Yeah. Absolutely. All right. Well, my fifth and final prediction for 2022 is, in line with a couple of things we've already touched on. Actually, you talked about, that RevOps position. I talked about, or the RevOps, alignment. I talked about CMO and the position and the marketing department underneath the CMO. I think there's going to be a similar shift in focus in terms of that agency, that brand and agency relationship to more of a, what I would call like a hybrid agency model, right? Especially when it comes to small businesses, small B2B businesses. I think there's been for the last, as digital has evolved, I think there's been this mindset of we don't understand it. So we're going to go find professionals that do understand it, which is great. We are those professionals that people are outsourcing this to. But the idea of completely mailing in your marketing strategy, I don't think is effective in the same way that you wouldn't completely mail in your sales strategy, right? You wouldn't say, hey, we don't have a sales team. We're going to completely outsource this, and someone's going to be responsible for every component of the sales. It's that's ridiculous for a company to even think about doing that. For most companies, there's bits and pieces that people can outsource. Maybe that's cold outreach or whatever we call appointment setting and SDRs, those kind of things. You bring in sales trainers, consultants. You bring in sales operations, Salesforce administrator, all those sorts of things. So there's a lot of need for that in the sales department. I think we're going to see a similar relationship in the marketing world where companies are going to build their own in-house marketing agencies, and they're going to bring on specialists to help them build those marketing departments, help train them. Again, marketing technology specialists, marketing operations. There's specific things that probably still would be outsourced, whether that's web development or specific, we talk about SEO. I mean, as brands realize the value and how much work actually goes into a true and effective marketing strategy, they're going to need more resources rather than less. And they're going to realize what we were trying to do with outsourcing with a small budget and expecting big results. That's going to change. We're going to build a marketing team in-house, but we also realize we can't do that all on our own. So you see this in bigger brands, B2C, brands. You see this has always been the way. You talk about we have a creative agency or agency of record. It's always been the process. You have a marketing team internally, but you also have an agency that comes in. Almost every department has that, right? Whether could be in engineering, IT, sales. You're almost always working with third-party, independent, consultants, agencies, whatever the word is. And I think marketing has been a little bit slow to adopt that. And I think there's going to be a big shift in that for, again, SMB type companies over the next year or so.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
All right. Well, if you've made it through, we're about an hour in. If you made it through the whole podcast here, if you agree, disagree, if there's any other predictions you have, we'd love to hear your predictions. send them in. We can talk about them maybe on our next podcast, or of course, looking at next year and see if we have any user submitted predictions that have come true. So I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts. As always, if you enjoyed the podcast, give us a like and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, and tune in next week for a new episode.
Growth Marketers is brought to you by One IMS, helping you reach new heights through integrated marketing. One world, one web, one IMS.